I will call to order the Whatcom County Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force Steering Committee. But before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connections across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all such public events. So welcome, everybody. Hope you did have a weird long weekend, sort of. We are going to talk a little bit about the Justice Project. I think it's kind of in the can right now as far as the council goes. It's sitting in introduction, ready for a hearing on next Tuesday. So that'll be interesting. We're having a tubing on the South Fork hearing the same night. So that's going to be a long meeting. So one thing that has come out of the implementation plan that once approved by the council, this group is going to have to do some serious work on. That is forming the JPOP, or the Justice Project Operating. What's the acronym? Somebody help me out. What's the OP? Oh.
Can't remember.
Okay. Anyway, it's an oversight function that will work with the implementation team through the executive's office and the sheriff's office as they're implementing the various aspects of the implementation plan. And there'll be a finance oversight committee that's separate. But the operation side will be subject to a committee created by us, the task force. So that's something that we're going to have big on our radar over the coming months to figure out a process, how we want to do that. And it's something maybe we can touch on today a little bit, just kick around some initial ideas. Of course, with it not being approved yet, we don't know that the membership will stay the same, but it's likely to, I think, at this point. That what's proposed in the ordinance. So anyway, anybody got any great ideas on going forward on how we might do this?
Barry, maybe you can summarize what the membership in the draft ordinance looks like.
It's really broad. It's a lot of the usual players in community, like I don't have the list in front of me, unfortunately, but it includes, other than just governmental officials, it includes a lot of stakeholders from the mental health, from youth. Jill, do you have it in front of you? You popped your hand up. That would be much better.
I do. To include the county executive, one county council member, the sheriff, Bellingham mayor, Bellingham city council member, one public defender, one elected representative from the remaining cities within Whatcom County, at least one representative from each federally recognized tribe within the Whatcom County, two criminal legal system utilizers with preference for formerly incarcerated and BIPOC individuals, one community-based behavioral health provider, one community-based treatment provider, one reentry specialist, one paramedic from EMS, one recovery subject matter expert, one youth representative such as from teen court programs, one supportive housing subject matter expert, one representative from the Racial Equity Commission, and the chairs of the task force. So I think maybe my first question is, are we, for example, the county executive, the council member, the council, or the county sheriff, those individuals who already sit on the task force, are we just going to assume that they'll then be on the JPOP as well? Or do you want to recruit and appoint a different set of people for that? For example, one community-based behavioral health provider. We've got a couple of those representatives.
Really?
So,
you.
Thoughts?
Because there was two different things that came up when we were discussing who needed to be there. One was a member from the public defense team. I kind of think I would like to see two. I would like to see one from the Office of Public Defense in reference to felony matters. And I would like to see probably somebody from Jason Smith's office, North County Public Defense, as they pretty much hold all the contracts with a lot of the small cities for public defense. So I think having somebody that represents the felony world as well as the misdemeanor world is important to having representation there. On the second one, you were mentioning somebody in the mental health field with teen court. And I was thinking either Jesse or Erica Crate would be excellent in reference to that, as they're working on establishing more teen court, or not teen court, sorry, teen, or I think Arlene can probably explain what they do better than I can, but I think they would be good representatives to help with the youth in that area. So that's what I have right now, and I'll let Arlene help me out because my words aren't working.
Arlene?
Do you want me to speak now?
Yeah, go ahead, Arlene.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, they're starting a program of a crisis respite program for teens. So they're establishing that and in the process of creating it now. And so that representation, I do think, is really important. My concern about this membership is, first of all, what's the total on this oversight? Do we have a number?
Jill's looking.
It's huge.
Yes.
My initial count is 20 to 22. And that's if a lot of those are task force members, it's just going to be a majority of the task force as well.
So let me give you a little background on how this happened. This list initially was under the Financial and Operations Oversight Committee. Had this list of membership list under it. The council decided they wanted to streamline the finance committee, so they dropped operations off of finance and they're just calling it Finance Oversight Committee. And they kept that at a very narrow membership. Then they said, let's just take all of those stakeholders that you had under that committee originally and move it over to the JPOP. So that's how it happened. And they just wholesale moved the whole list over from the finance and operations proposed list. So anyway, that's how it happened. Stephen?
A couple of different thoughts. Number one, I actually understand and ultimately could support Raylene's suggestion for a felony and a more small jurisdiction public defender. But I don't think that's our call. That's the council's call on the composition of the committee. If you want to change that, change it. But right now, that's not what it is. So that's my first point. My second point is where there's a single identifiable person in that generic list of members. I think the task force could vote to have that person, seated on that committee. For instance, there's only one mayor of Bellingham, there's only one sheriff. It's obvious who would have that seat. If we have multiple people like behavioral health providers, and I don't know, we've got behavioral health providers and treatment specialists. I don't know who we're talking about there, but in any event, where there are multiple possibilities, given the way the community discussion has gone on this, not all of which I'm pleased with, I think we should take applications for those seats. So where it's clear who it would be, we could sort of adopt them. But I don't think we should be picking and choosing amongst people, nor do I think we should just designate people from other programs, new or existing, that we want to have in that. We should have a more open process than that. Should not be the steering committee handpicking people.
I mean, my concern about the balance of this committee is that we've been receiving feedback from our larger community that the decision-making process is, from their perspective, out of balance. And by that, I mean people who are part of the system, the criminal justice system and the social service system. The community is wanting more membership from people who are not part of government and the establishment. And so do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but that's a conversation that they should have with the county council at this point, not with us or the task force. We should carry out the ordinance.
Okay, but we have information that is significant, and we've been listening to the voices for several years now. So I think it's important for us to speak out.
So can I clarify a little bit?
Go ahead, Jill.
Would be helpful, Arlene. I've included in the meeting packet for today, all of you, this information that I'm reading from. So you should hopefully have it before you. So I think any changes to what is already there, those need to be given to council, and that feedback and request those changes, Arlene, to council.
Okay.
My intent in including this in the agenda is to take what is here and figure out how, or at least start talking about how best to implement what is here already. So that's kind of where I was going with this, including this on the agenda. So
I was going to say the same thing, Jill, because the council hasn't finally approved this anyway.
Right,
So
right.
it's kind of premature for us to be weighing in on that anyways.
Yeah, there are some larger questions though, like for example, is the J-pop going to be created by ordinance, or is it something that the full task force will create just within its own bylaws? So there are questions like that. Are we going to shuffle around all of the committees? Are we going to just rethink all of the committee structures? Or are we just going to add this on to what's existing? So those are the kinds of questions that I had in mind. And I apologize, I was going to read through this and make notes before the meeting and I didn't have time.
Jill, which of your emails had the agenda attached to it? I was looking for that before the meeting and couldn't find it.
I would have to resend it, go and look for it and resend it. I don't remember when I sent it.
All right.
Probably I sent it Monday, I think.
I'll look again.
Caleb.
Thanks. So my thoughts on this are, for the positions that are not specified specifically that it's a person, is there room in this discussion for recruitment? For example, I think that there's some opportunities for people who haven't been largely represented in the groups that we meet in. For example, members of the BIPOC community. That's just an example, but is there room for recruitment? Like, do we have either funding or a mechanism to get the word out about, hey, we're looking for people who are interested in serving on this committee, and this is what the framework might look like, so that we can get a broader net cast for potential candidates to apply? Just a thought.
We actually talked about this yesterday a little bit with Pyramid about their future, some of their work, and we didn't go into detail, but that subject came up about forming the J-pop and how some communication might be helpful. Jill, can you want to?
I was just going to add to that. Kathy also asked me if there might be room or a need to continue Holly and Marty with this process as well.
Yeah.
First, I'm just trying to clarify and understand. So I understand J-pop and I understand the council made some changes to initial composition of various advisory groups. So the first question, Barry, is for you. On the Finance Advisory Board, which I believe that will not be under the IPRTF, correct? That's autonomous.
Correct.
All right. Now, does that also have a different composition than what I'm seeing reflected in what Jill put in today? Like, does that also include, for example, reentry specialist, the paramedic? Okay, so that one, so the one the council changed was what would be the J-pop under the IPRTF?
Yeah, they moved all those extra kind of what the community positions and the ones you were just referred to
Yep.
over to the J-pop from the finance and operations.
Okay, so they moved them over. So, okay, great. I'm tracking then. All right, because for a while that was in finance. So finance now is smaller again, autonomous. Now this is part. So I really think, assuming all this is approved, we just need to have a discussion of how, because we haven't had this before with the IPRTF, how we determine if there's multiple people interested who we pick. So it's a combination of recruitment, and then I would, off the top of my head, think the approach I would recommend is if we have multiple people, for example, interested in being a reentry specialist, we get an application form similar to what council does, have steering committee review them and possibly make recommendations to the task force, but it would be a task force decision. And I suspect in most cases, 90% of them will likely have one qualified. I don't think there'll be too many cases where we have multiple people trying to get on here and have to make a hard decision. But that would be, but we don't have a process to select people. Historically, when we've added anyone to an advisory group, we've just brought it to the task force, they've approved them, that's it. But because this is a defined number of people, that's a system we'll need in place, I think. So, and Jill will probably have better ideas of how to fine tune it. But my thought is recruit, have a form, steering committee makes a recommendation, and task force approves it.
Stephen?
Yeah, I had a couple thoughts. One first is to echo what Jack said and rely on Jill, but I don't think our past selection process fits this, because we've just chosen a chair, and the chair chooses the committee members. The task force sort of approves pro forma. So I do think adding to Jill's open question list is who would be the chairs for this, and the task force could designate that would have some precedent, but we could also let the group select who the chair is. I don't know. It seems to me it would be useful to have a charter for this committee as well. And I would like to say that there are a lot of people trying to influence decisions that have already been made, who don't really support the plan. They've called it terrible. They've called it, out of sync with the community. I would like myself to have people who have some baseline commitment to the implementation plan and the process that's been laid out, not to start tearing it apart or free associating ideas they think would be good for it. There's been a lot of work put into this plan so far, and I think the first responsibility is to oversee the operations and the implementation of the plan that the council passes. So I don't want to have a litmus test necessarily, but I'd like to have a fairly high level of confidence in the people we put on that committee, that they'd be working constructively rather than freelancing.
Perry?
It was actually along the same line that I had a question, or just maybe just any kind of input. It does list in the advisory boards that, as somebody had mentioned, one reentry specialist. I am currently responsible for the supervision of the contract with Lifeline Connections for behavioral health reentry services in the jail. Are people's thoughts that the reentry specialist is a boots on the ground level of, individual, obviously working with incarcerated and releasing. And so just a, point of clarification that this individual may or may not be speaking from, their personal perspective and or the collective perspective in terms of the work that we're doing, with we work pretty closely with Lifeline Connections, have a couple of meetings per month, just in regard to, components and so forth. So just asking for any kind of input. I'm not sure, what that is specifically targeting. Is a reentry specialist, for example, a supervisor of an individual that is providing reentry services, or nope, we're talking about that position because that happens to be the definition of the position that we're actually is part of that contract. Any thoughts?
Well, the council didn't have any preferences. They just want that field represented. So I think that the thought is that leaving it up to the task force to make those kind of calls.
Just to interject, this is why I think we need a charter. Because I think somebody with more like a supervisor who has both a sense of services on the ground, but a policy level and an intersection with other participating service providers would be the better perspective. That would just be my view. But we should clarify that.
Jill, it seems like we need something that would function the same way as an ordinance does, creating an advisory committee, something that does have the basic charter, the basic outline, the membership, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what we would call it, a resolution by the task force or something. I don't know what the instrument is, but.
So the current committees, there are a number of ways to go about it. The current committees, I don't believe, are even in the bylaws.
Right.
So the task force can just approve, let's create a committee and not memorialize it anywhere. You can create a charter to include it into the bylaws if you want to do it that way. You can have a resolution for the council to approve if you want. Or we can create an ordinance that would create the subcommittee and memorialize it in the county code. And in fact, I'm thinking it probably would need to be an amendment to the current task force statutes. So there are a number of ways to do that.
Raylene?
Thank you. The boots on the ground person for reentry specialist to me seems like the best fit, as I think somebody that's actually doing the job is going to know what's needed and what's not needed. But I also have concerns that we really need those people on the ground and not sitting in meetings, because we're short there. So maybe the supervisory role is a better fit to make sure that there's communication from the person doing the job to the supervisor to represent. But then my next question, if this passes, is this more of a topic that should be at the full task force meeting and not just a steering committee? Because if we're making these decisions, everybody in the task force should have buy-in and not just a steering committee.
I certainly think ultimately you're correct, Raylene. I think we just wanted to kick it off here just to get it, on our radar. Any other thoughts? Okay, we'll move on then. Law enforcement.
Right quick. Sorry, Barry, right quick. This, if approved, this does include a budget to create and implement the JPOP in the amount of $24,000 per year, it says, and I'm not sure if that's just for 1 year or every year. So be thinking about that as well, how you might want to carry that out.
Good point. Anything else on this? Okay, we'll move on to law enforcement and emergency medical services drop off at the Deacon Center for Hope.
Barry, one last thought on that.
Sure, go ahead, Stephen.
My preference personally would be not to bureaucratize this more than we need to. The JPOP is in the ordinance itself. I don't think we need another ordinance. the steering committee has a charter. We've been working on revising that guides its work because it's so central. This would be another central place, and I don't see why. That's why I called it a charter. I don't see why the task force just couldn't develop a job description, a scope of work, and its own operating rules for this. And we don't need an ordinance. We don't need a resolution. I think that would be internal to the task force.
I agree with Stephen on that.
Yeah, I think when I said an instrument, I meant mostly internal to the task force. I agree with you, Stephen. I think that we can take care of that within our own ranks. Okay, let's go to law enforcement and EMS drop off at the Ann Deacon Center for Hope. Who's handling this? Is this yours, Perry?
I'm not certain about that. Maybe Jill can help just a little bit. I think that we wanted to keep this topic on the steering committee agenda. Just we were definitely had talked some, obviously, in our last main task force meeting, and wanted to continue to talk on this particular topic. Beyond that, I don't know that I can offer detail that would be helpful, Jill.
Yeah, you're correct, Perry. This was the main topic at the last task force meeting, and there was a decision to continue it both in this coming month and the July meeting of the full task force and the committees. So both legal and justice and behavioral health have this scheduled for continued discussion at their meetings this month.
Jack?
I think the question is how much of this goes on this agenda and how far, Perry, are we with our follow-up items? I don't have the minutes in front of me, but I know we talked about some next steps and what would happen. I think that included some clear parameters. And how far along are we with that?
I haven't moved forward other than communicating with both of the providers about the specific steps that they are taking for systems improvement, measurable steps that they have and are taking for systems improvement. The other piece was identifying the number of denials that occurred on a monthly basis and including that in the report. And those are the only two components that I recall. Forgive me.
I don't have the notes in front of me, but what I recall us asking the providers for what we said we needed was a fairly simple metric of who they can take, how they can take them, what that standard is, because there seems to be lack of clarity. And I recall particularly the guy from, I think it was from Compass, indicated they could probably do that. Because I think what we're trying to provide to first responders is a metric of who, who can likely be taken. I get some of it subjective, like we talked about, you can't take somebody that's actively violent, but there seems to be a lack of clear communication as to who can be accepted and who can't. And I think that's what Stephen, you were there, is that, or anybody else? So that's my recollection of what we're trying to report back on and trying to have in writing, clear, with everybody on the same page.
I thought the one additional question that came up was, even if you know who to bring, because they're likely to fit the profile, how long do you have to stand there and twiddle your thumbs while they go through the admission protocol? And so that time lag for the in the field people was continuing to be an impediment, as it had been at the old facility. That's something I took from the conversation. Caleb, you may have a recollection of that as well. So I don't know if there's a way to truncate that or expedite that, or hand that off and let people go back to work while that process gets taken care of. I thought that was a conversation both the people bringing folks to the facility and the service providers were supposed to talk about.
Raylene?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was kind of gonna see what Caleb could do for us. I think we're gonna ask for Perry's assistance too at the next Legal and Justice Subcommittee. This is a topic that's gonna come back up there so that we can report back. But is that something the index committee can help with on maybe surveying the law enforcement agencies that are using it, that are using MCOT, as well as the Deacon Crisis Center for Hope, to kind of get a combined effort to get information on both facilities and what we need more for the different jurisdictions throughout the county.
I think that would be a good thing for us to do for index. Jill, if you wouldn't mind making a note of that for our next meeting, please. Thank you.
Perry?
Can I share my screen, Jill? Is that acceptable, appropriate?
Yeah, you should be able to do that. If not, let me know.
Think that folks can see? Yes.
Yes.
This is, forgive me, as I wasn't tracking here in terms of just the steps that we were taking, because I have my notes and just didn't go back to it. This was provided for feedback at our Crisis Stabilization Center Advisory Committee that meets once per month. It does include law enforcement representation, both Bellingham Police Department and the Sheriff's Office, as well as EMS and the fire department. Obviously the left side, the intent here is creation of a visor card for first responders, just for quick reference. So it's printed on a hard stock, I think with, just a protective, cover. The left side is just general, voluntary stay, 18 years of age older, et cetera, et cetera. So very basic stuff relative to the Crisis Stabilization Center. And the right side is more specifically for law enforcement, first responder drop off, making a phone call. There's a protocol that is in place at this point with the Crisis Stabilization Center staff that if law enforcement or first responders have an individual that they want to transport, the primary thing that they want to know is there an available bed? Because I don't want to come over if there isn't. And then they essentially do kind of a phone clearance of the individual and then prep for that intake. So it was embraced by the Crisis Stabilization Center Advisory Committee during our last Monday meeting. And my intent was actually to go to print on this for distribution for law enforcement and first responders. So just one of the steps that we had talked about, obviously, in the main IPRTF, set of goals that we wanted to accomplish. I can send this to Jill, obviously, to distribute. So
Thanks, Perry. Any other discussion on Deacon Center for Hope and drop-offs? Okay. Items for the next task force agenda. What do we have, Joe?
We have
Oh, it's right here.
the Justice Project Implementation Plan, follow up to the law enforcement and EMS discussion from last month. Is that something you still want on the agenda for the full task force in July to continue that conversation?
Yeah, I think at the very least, we could get Perry to give an update on whether it's bringing it full circle or giving a status update. I think we need to do that. I think it's important, and I think we need to do it.
Yeah, as a separate agenda item, we had to cancel this month's Crisis Stabilization Facility Committee meeting. So Perry was going to do his quarterly census update to the full task force as well. So we'll have that. That's a third agenda item.
Maybe we can combine them. I think those seem like a natural thing to go together.
Yeah.
And the role of the steering committee that Mike Parker put together and the steering committee, I believe, approved. And then the committee updates.
Well, I would imagine that the Justice Project Implementation Plan is gonna have a lot of discussion around J-pop, don't you think, Jill?
Could be.
Yeah, I think so. So we should probably plan on a fairly long agenda item for that. Anything else? Anything else we need to put on? Perry's that an old hand?
Oh, sorry. Yep.
No problem. Okay, it looks like that's the agenda, Joe.
Since we're under other business a little bit, I wanted to connect with Caleb. The next index committee meeting is scheduled for August 1st. So it looks like we have one agenda item. I wanted to also note that this meeting will be after council approves the resolution with the implementation plan. And a big part of that implementation plan also is boosting the data stuff. So I'm wondering if we want to make that a second index committee item. Agenda items to go over what's approved in the implementation plan and hopefully get Tyler there.
Yeah,
Everyone.
I think I heard the exec and other administration talking about the opportunities that we may have to have staffing, database, kind of the concepts
Okay.
talking about for a while. So it's possible, I don't know, because I haven't tracked like in real time where that is at, whether it's at council, whether it's still in the works, but they had talked about having an additional position or two for some data analysts and some people who can help with infrastructure. So that could be really huge. It's just a question of whether that's at what stage in the process for the county. So
I think that's a good update. It is in the implementation plan though, right? Stephen, Barry and Jack doing all of that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it just that there might actually be, physical, asks and position allocations and stuff like that could be filled. I don't know where we're at with it, but
Okay.
but it's something that has been discussed at least. So
We'll
Yeah.
find out August 1st.
Jack, just a reminder that I won't be able to attend the July task force meeting, so it's all yours.
Well, I've got lots of help from the people on the screen. Thanks. When is it? I better make sure I can. The 17th. Yeah, I'm good.
Anything else under other business?
Jill, maybe when we do the task force, sorry. It's been a while since we've had committee updates because of our agenda. So it might be good to let people know we actually believe we're going to have time for committee updates. So they're actually, well, I guess a lot of you are here, but I think we'll actually have time for committee updates. So it'd be good to actually have them. And I know we've kind of gotten the habit of putting it on the agenda if there's time. In the last, 3 meetings, there hasn't been time, but looking at this agenda, there will be. So I think it would be good to have that information.
Yeah.
Oh, and when we get there, Barry, I do have an agenda item for today. Stephen and I are doing reports to Bellingham City Council and County Council, and I just wanted to see what people wanted highlighted. So whenever that's appropriate in this agenda.
Well, it would be now. We're under other business at the end.
Okay. All right, great. Cool. So we're doing a short presentation to Bellingham City Council on Monday and the same with the County Council on Tuesday. Stephen, in both cases, I've indicated we're going to be in the 15 to 20 minute range tops, so short with time for Q&A. But while Stephen and I can certainly gather information and we have some ideas of what we'll say, it seemed appropriate to ask you as the chairs and steering committee, what if there's something specific you want highlighted out of the annual report. So that was it.
Raylene, you got suggestion for this?
Oops, now I'm unmuted. Actually, on other business, I wanted to pick Maya's brain on needs for public defense and counsel. I know that there's been shortage of attorneys lately, and if that's something we should maybe not have on this task force, but maybe on legal and justice in the future, if things are getting better. What your thoughts are on what we can do to help that, because I think that'll help our incarceration.
Yeah, that situation is pretty rough at the moment. We got to capacity in our office at the end of June and had to send cases to assigned counsel. They still had cases from when we overflowed in May that hadn't gotten attorneys, Class A felonies, and I just took a few of those back in the beginning of July because we're at the beginning of the month and I can kind of reload people. But that's like, that'll limit, that's going to affect then the end of this month. And so we're sort of getting into this not a great situation. And I imagine that Dave Reynolds is having difficulty finding counsel to take all of the cases, even though Melissa Stone came on. I mean, she has to work within the standards of indigent defense as well. So I don't know where her numbers are at, and she's taking cases in juvenile district and superior court. And she's not qualified to take B violent or A felonies. So she's just, anyway, and part of this problem is that we lost 2 attorneys, right? And so one of them is gone and I have reassigned all of her cases. So those are all taken care of, but one of those attorneys is working through the end of July, but I can't assign him new cases because he still has 58 cases that he's holding at this moment that I'm hoping he can resolve some number of, but whatever he doesn't resolve, I'm going to have to reassign. So they get all double counted. And although I have an attorney starting to fill in, oh boy, it's just, I don't have enough places to put cases. It's not good. And I know that, the prosecutors are asking, will be asked. I understand. I don't think I'm announcing anything. Oh, I don't know. Like maybe I shouldn't make an announcement out of turn. They're not here. I know that we will be asking for some supplemental midterm budget adjustment to hire more attorneys is my expectation. Stark and Tom and I are discussing what that would be, and to some extent, it would need to be responsive to requests made by other departments, because if any, as we know, when you have more deputies, more cases, when you have more prosecutors, things move faster, we have to keep up. So that's all happening. And it's Stark's out on vacation till July 17th, and then he's in trial that week. I think it would be I don't know what kind of, I don't think anyone here is opposed to us having enough staff to take all these cases. The time, we've got, I don't know. Stark's just not in a position really to make a report time wise, I don't think. I could try to do that. If you wanted to put it on the agenda, I can do that. Sorry, I'm just trying to every day make things fit. That's
Maya, we would love to hear from you, but don't crash your department and try to do that. I mean, it sounds like you all are really operating really on a lot of tight budgets and schedules and everything. So whatever's comfortable for you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the people who make the decisions about funding are aware of what's going on, and we're communicating with them. We're meeting with Tyler very soon in the next 2 weeks. Yeah, I mean, it's coming up in July. I think when Stark's back, we're meeting with the executive's office to talk about it. And
So Maya, I'm thinking maybe if we started with just the August legal injustice and explained the Supreme Court caseloads, what's required, what's not required, because I think a lot of people don't know those requirements, how many cases you guys can take, and then what the shortage is, and then how when you're transferring cases from one attorney to a new attorney, how the process starts over and how it delays people that are currently incarcerated. I mean, if we can just start with the baseline and then we can maybe go from just the subcommittee and bringing that as a report to the regular committee, because I think the general public is starting to watch our meetings more than they were in the past, and they need to know where the funding is going and why we need it. I mean, that's just a thought. I don't know if Stephen and Barry have.
Can you remind me when that meeting is in August? Raylene, do you happen to know?
It would be the second Tuesday in August from,
Okay, yeah, I'm available that day, so if I can. I could do that then.
that gives you a little more time to work with Stark and give us kind of a feedback on that.
Yeah,
Any comments from Barry or Stephen or Arlene on that? Am I missing anything?
I think that would be good to have an update from Maya. I think you're right, Raylene, people are paying more attention, and I think people don't understand and need to be informed about the various places where there are bottlenecks, whether it's competency restoration or getting back up to speed with trial setting. And this is another one that nobody will have ever heard about, but is a significant barrier to case flow, obviously.
Yeah, I agree with everything Stephen just said.
okay,
So I want to circle back to what Jack asked. I did have an idea about, at least when we're talking to the city, to make sure to emphasize things that are partnerships, between the city and the county, especially in, regarding the implementation plan and how we can work together. I think that's, always a good thing to do. Anything else under other business? Okay, I see we have one member of the public out there, Jill.
Yes, thank you. Just right quick first though, Raylene and Arlene, if you could stay after the meeting so we can discuss next week's agenda, that would be great. And Barry, you're correct. We do have one attendee today. If you'd like to speak to the committee, please virtually raise your hand now. And no hands are raised.
Okay, well, Kristen, it was good to have you with us, even though we didn't hear from you this morning. So thanks for tuning in. All right, everybody. We'll see you later.
yeah. Hey, Jill,
Yeah,
was someone looking into maybe making the attendees visible? Is that still, somebody's gonna look into that?
yeah, people have been on vacation, so we haven't had a chance to work that out yet, but we're working on it. Thanks, Maya.
Thanks for following up. I appreciate it.